Good afternoon, everybody. Anthony Aniano here from RotoBaller Radio and RotoBaller.com with a look at the Week 13 sleeper and value plays for your 2022 fantasy football season. Don't forget, guys, Arizona, and Carolina on a bye this week for Week 13, so be mindful of that. So maybe you all looking for some help, maybe a little sneaky play, whether it's for your season-long or DFS lineups. And we start at the quarterback position, Trevor Lawrence of the Jacksonville Jaguars against the Detroit Lions in Detroit, in the Dome, on the fast track, valued at $5,900 on DraftKings, averaging 18.6 fantasy points per game in that DraftKings scoring format. And he's going against a Lions defense. We know they can put up points, but they stop very few people, as they are ranked 32nd in the league in allowing fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. They allow 28 points per game to the quarterback position and have allowed 18 passing touchdowns on the season. Detroit allows as a whole 28.2 points per game. Trevor Lawrence coming off the best game of his career, that late second comeback victory. He's emerging with 2, even 3 wideouts, and now making plays with Marvin Jones, JaMycal Hasty catching the ball out of the backfield. Looks like Travis Etienne will play. But Trevor Lawrence at $5,900 on DraftKings is a terrific value for Week 13. At the running back position, I'm coming at you with 3 running backs this week. Usually it's 2, but I'm going to be mindful of the fact that A.J. Dillon, who is one of my value plays, $5,600 on DraftKings, averaging 8.2 fantasy points per game. Now, Week 12 had his best game of the season, 17.8 fantasy points, but he's dealing with a quad. Now, he did practice Wednesday, and he did practice Thursday at the time of this recording. So things can change, of course, between Friday, Saturday, and game day Sunday. But he was limited in practice the last couple of days. My advice, if A.J. Dillon is active, he's got a terrific matchup against the Chicago Bears on Sunday. Chicago 27th in the league against opposing running backs. Running backs average 26.3 fantasy points per game, and as a whole, running backs have scored 15 touchdowns against the Bears defense. So whether it's catching the ball, rushing the ball, there's enough here for both Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon to have some success against Chicago. A.J. Dillon, as a flex play, could be interesting this week if healthy. Dameon Pierce, my second running back this week against the Cleveland Browns. Now, some people would say, well, Anthony, Dameon Pierce has been a play all year. Well, the truth is, seeing a lot more questions about Dameon Pierce now that he's coming off of 2 straight disappointing weeks, and his price tag on DraftKings is below $6,000 for the week at $5,900. Yet still averaging 13.6 points per game, even though he's been disappointing the last couple of weeks. Great matchup against the Cleveland Browns. A get-right matchup against the Cleveland Browns. We're 30th in the league against opposing running backs in terms of allowing fantasy points. Running backs average 29.5 fantasy points per game against that Cleveland run defense. They've allowed 13 touchdowns in total to opposing running backs. And my third running back of the week, Gus Edwards of the Baltimore Ravens against the Denver Bronco defense. Now, don't get me wrong, that Bronco defense has been good, but they did allow over 100 yards rushing last week to Deonta Foreman. Gus Edwards is averaging 11.8 points per game, and he's valued at $5,400 on DraftKings. Better in a standard than a PPR format. We know he doesn't catch the ball much out of the backfield, but Gus Edwards has found the end zones a few times when healthy this year, and right now he is healthy. Okay, Denver, like we said, allowing 21.9 points per game to opposing running backs. They've allowed 5 touchdowns to the position, puts them at 14th in the league, right in the middle of the pack in fantasy points allowed to opposing running backs. But Foreman did go over 100 last week for the Carolina Panthers. Now, at the wide receiver position, my first wide receiver is Zay Jones of the Jacksonville Jaguars. He was a waiver wire ad, and now he's a value play. DraftKings has him at only $4,900 for Week 13. Yet he averages 12.7 points per game. I'm using him anywhere I can. DFS, season long, wherever I need to, on the road, in that Detroit lineup. Like I said, the Dome, the fast track. Let's have a shootout between the Jaguars and the Lions. Zay Jones has been fantastic the last 2 weeks and pretty consistent overall. He's got 19 receptions on 24 targets in his last 2 games, including that 145-yard performance last week. He has proven himself to be a solid wide receiver, too, opposite Christian Kirk. And he goes against the Detroit Lions secondary that really can't stop anybody. They're 30th in the league against opposing wide receivers, allowing 40 points a game to the wide receiver position. So Kirk, Zay Jones, and even Marvin Jones in a position to put up some fantasy points. Like I mentioned earlier with Trevor Lawrence, the Lions defense has allowed 18 passing touchdowns this season. 11 of those touchdowns have gone to the wide receiver position. My second sleeper and value play at the wide receiver position, George Pickens of the Pittsburgh Steelers. $5,100 on DraftKings, averaging 10.2 fantasy points per game in a DK scoring format. He's got 3 straight games of 10 or more fantasy points, and they're on the road against the Atlanta Falcons and their secondary. Atlanta is 29th in the league in fantasy points allowed to opposing wide receivers, 39.3 points per game. They've allowed 13 touchdowns to the wide receiver position alone. Okay, Kenny Pickett's in a nice spot against this Atlanta secondary. They should be able to throw the ball against them. Both Deontay Johnson and George Pickens in a position to get in the end zone and put up some fantasy points. And finally, my sleeper and value play at the tight end position. Very rarely do I do this, but it's back-to-back weeks. Forrest Moreau continues to be undervalued, underappreciated, and under-rostered, and yet he has a touchdown in 2 of his last 3 games. He has 10 or more fantasy points in 2 of his last 3 games, and yet $3,600 on DraftKings, while averaging 7.1 fantasy points. Tight end has been a vacant lot this season. Foster Moreau has filled in well for Darren Waller, and he goes against the Chargers defense that is 24th in the league against opposing tight ends. 12.7 points per game allowed to the tight end position, and they have allowed 4 touchdowns on the season to the position. Foster Moreau becoming a useful play in Darren Waller's absence. So to recap, this value in sleeper plays for Week 13 of your fantasy football season: quarterback, Trevor Lawrence; running backs, A.J. Dillon if the quad is ready to go, Dameon Pierce, and Gus Edwards. At the wide receiver position, we have Zay Jones and George Pickens. And your tight end for Week 13 is Foster Moreau. Guys, don't forget, head to RotoBaller.com right now. Sign up for the Premium Pass using the promotional code ACES. Save yourself a little bit of money at checkout. And make sure you get involved. Lineup Optimizer, Team Sync Tools, betting, whatever you're looking for, RotoBaller.com has you covered. Like and subscribe right here to the RotoBaller YouTube channel. Great content, starting with Waiver Wire on Monday morning, ending with the values in sleeper play on Saturday, and all sorts of start-sit information in between. Give me a follow on Twitter at Aniano Fantasy. Good luck this week, and we'll see you next time right here on RotoBaller Radio.